In the past decade, there have been several major world-rumbling investigations into the financial affairs of the world's rich and powerful. In 2014, the LuxLeaks saw the public tax rulings for over 300 multinational companies based in Luxembourg. The disclosure shined a spotlight on the issues of tax avoidance schemes in Luxembourg and elsewhere. It contributed to the implementation of measures aimed at reducing tax dumping and regulating tax avoidance schemes beneficial to multinational companies. 2 years later, in 2016, the Panama Papers shared the findings of more than 11.5 million financial and legal records, exposing a system that enabled crime, corruption, and wrongdoing. In the aftermath of the Panama Papers, the world saw citizens hit the streets in protest. They threw bananas and yogurt in Iceland and rocks in Pakistan. Governments fell. Authorities launched hundreds of tax probes and criminal investigations. The effects of that investigation still linger and will for years. There was also the Paradise Papers in 2017 and FinCEN files in 2020. And now we have the Pandora Papers. They are revealing the secret wealth and dealings of world leaders, politicians, and billionaires. One of the biggest leaks of financial documents showing that some 35 current and former leaders and more than 300 public officials are featured in the files from offshore companies. The leaked records come from 14 offshore services firms spanning across all continents, from Belize to Seychelles to Vietnam. Almost 12 million leaked documents allege concealed assets, tax avoidance, and in some cases, even money laundering. Related to all of this, an Oxfam report released in 2020 shared these concerning figures. The 22 richest men in the world have more wealth than all the women in Africa. And second, getting the richest 1% to pay just 0.5% extra tax on their wealth over the next 10 years would equal the investment needed to create 117 million jobs in sectors such as elderly and childcare, education, and health. And according to the OECD, the top 0.6% of the world's population, consisting of adults with more than $1 million in assets, or the 42 million richest people in the world, held 39.3% of the world's wealth. The next 4.4%, about 311 million people, held 32.3% of the world's wealth. The bottom 95 held 28.4% of the world's wealth. Today, we're looking at what the Pandora Papers hold and what it means happens next. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Joining me today is Gbolahan Olojede, the Executive Director, DMA Advisory and Management Services Limited. Gbolahan, welcome back to the show once again, and thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let me start with this. In just the past 10 years alone, there were 4 and now 5 global investigations that have shown that those at the very top, the rich and the powerful, are not as clean as they would like the rest of the world to believe. And even with the evidence, why has it been so easy after each investigation for the wealthy to continue to get away with tax avoidance, concealing their assets, laundering money, and many other allegations that we're finding from these investigations? Why has it been easy for them to continue to do this?
Well, it is glaring as to why this happens. When you look at the profile of the people that are involved, these are presidents, prime ministers, heads of government, current and former. So these are extremely influential people. By the time you leave those categories, you go to the billionaires and the celebrities all over the whole world. These same people are the people who call the shots. They are the people who determine what decision is made. And all over the whole world, these are the people. So if the people who decide how we live our lives, who make all the decisions, are the people involved in this, that is exactly why it is possible to continue to happen. And the sad news is I don't think that is about to change. What you're going to see is that it may change from one form to another, It may move from one asset manager to another, but the underlying issue in itself is not likely to significantly change.
And we'll get to that in just a bit, especially after the Panama Papers came out just a few years ago. But let's talk a bit about how these things work. How do these offshore accounts, these offshore companies, these shell companies and corporations that have been set up to hide money, how do they work? Sort of break it down for us in layman terms.
Okay. There are issues of taxation, which was how they started. So the tax rates in Nigeria or or in Ghana or in UK are all different. So you have people who have money who want to start their money away in the so-called tax haven, where they can acquire assets. For example, in Nigeria, you have what you call capital gain tax. So which means when you make a capital gain, you're supposed to pay tax on it. That's what you call capital transfer tax in Nigeria. When you transfer capital, there is a tax that is due on it. But when you do this via some of this structure, you avoid all these taxation issues because these businesses are all taxable. They just want you to bring all that money. They don't tax you. Or if they tax you, the tax will be so minimal compared to your place of original domiciliation. So these were the initial things that encouraged all these issues. But beyond that, you also have other genuine reasons. There are people who have lost assets just because government changed. And the new government went after their businesses and confiscated their money, and they went from being a good businessman to being a poor man. So for people who have a genuine concern about the political environment where they think there might not be the right judiciary or justice, they want to have certain security. So they take the ownership of their assets out of that country and put it in all this legal structure to hold it for them. So and to do that in itself is not illegal. It is not criminal. Want to allow somebody to hold your assets.
Okay, so you mentioned tax haven, and that's a phrase or a word, even though it's two words actually, that we keep hearing a lot. And it's really come up in recent times as well concerning that global corporate tax pact that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has been working on. But give us a bit more about what makes a country a tax haven. Why are they such issues for the rest of the world, for other countries who are not termed as tax havens?
Being a tax haven simply has to do with the taxes that are applicable in that jurisdiction. So if I do a particular transaction that will normally attract a tax of 20% in my country, but I can take that same transaction into a jurisdiction where the tax applicable will only be 2%. It is a normal thing to do that. However, while people who have a genuine need to take advantage of certain tax possibilities, and we have seen some presidents across the world, even in the West, are involved in this. It is also possible. It opens the same exact opportunities to people who are criminal-minded, who want to fleece their country, take the money away, own assets under layers upon layers of structures that you cannot begin to even know who is the real owner of this asset. So it opens the gateway for money laundering, for corruption, corruptly obtain money to be stacked away. So while he has a few group of genuine people who have a concern and should use that kind of a structure, there's also a huge opportunity which is open to people who are criminal-minded to be able to use it.
Okay, so let's go back in time. The Panama Papers came out in 2016. It wasn't the first. It was actually about the fourth in the line, or the third in the line of these massive global investigations that have linked newsrooms and journalists around the world. And in terms of what happened with the Panama Papers, there have been a lot of questions as to what actual repercussions have come. So the Panama Papers saw at least 2 governments removed and some changes in laws in some countries across the world. But given what was revealed, do you think enough changes were really made? Were the repercussions as heavy as we expected them to be? Now, given again that we're hearing about the Pandora Papers, which means this kind of stuff has continued, irregardless.
Yes. Even this one, the new one that has come out, in another 2 weeks, the heat will have died down and nothing is likely to come out of it, simply because of the caliber of people that are involved. Now, the onus is on the citizens. This is, if we are ever going to make a change, the onus will go back to the citizens of the world. I mean, it's a global phenomenon. To be able to make certain demands, certain from their elective offices. Say, look, if you are going to be the prime minister of this country, you shall not hold this kind of account. Let's assume that is a way to go about it. If the people believe that is the what they want, then let them demand of it from their elective officials. And if you do, you must declare. But where there are no such laws, no such rules, and there's an opportunity for me as an elective officer to take advantage of taxables, I will take advantage of it. So let's push it back to the citizens to ask questions, to make demand, and ensure that their elective officers will keep to those questions, to those requirements that they are making. Otherwise, there will be another squeal in another few years' time, and nothing will still happen again.
All right. Gbolahan, hold on. We're going to continue this conversation. We have to ask the question towards the end. Is the world really fighting corruption? Are we really fighting tax havens and concealed assets and the illicit flow of money from country to country if year after year, at least 4 years, 4 times in the past 10 years, we've seen massive releases of information such as this that shows the rich and the mighty are circumventing the system? What does the system need to do? And how does the world win this fight? Business Edge will continue right after this. Now, still with me is Gbolahan Olojede, the Executive Director at DMA Advisory and Management Services. Now, Gbolahan, when we have these kind of investigations and reports coming out about the world's rich, powerful, and wealthy, it also links to a conversation about income inequality and global poverty around the world. And earlier on, I did share about how those divisions are sort of made. Let me just restate for emphasis. The 22 richest men in the world have more wealth than all the women in Africa. Getting the richest 1% to pay just 0.5% extra tax on their wealth over the next 10 years would equal investments needed to create about 117 million jobs in sectors such as elderly care, child care, education, and health. So I think the question here is, in your estimation, do you think these conversations around the activities and illegal actions of the rich and mighty are linked linked with conversations around wealth inequality and income inequality and just the global poverty conversation as well?
We actually need to have certain high-level discussions that are multilateral in nature, because the reality of those numbers you spelled out is that we can solve a whole lot of the world's problems if these people, these topmost earners and wealthy men, are willing to just take a percentage of whatever they have and make it available to the rest of the world. We are going to cure a whole lot of the problems of the world. But then, they are not under obligation to do it, which is why multilateral discussions on this matter need to happen. Even if we are going to have any significant impact on certain cooperations across the nations of the world on this subject matter, it has to be a multilateral discussion as well. While we are talking at the bigger level, at the global level, if you look even inside Nigeria, the money that is available to maybe the top 1,000 wealthy people in Nigeria, is so humongous that even if they pay the right level of taxes, go and look at our taxes now. The wealthy in Nigeria are not paying taxes. Most of them are escaping the taxes. That is why when you see our tax to GDP, it is extremely poor. We are doing extremely poor on personal income taxes because the wealthy do not pay. Compare it to an American example, where the top 1% earners in America, top 1%, pay as much as 39 or to 40% of the entire personal income tax in America. In Nigeria, it is the middle class. It is you and I that they deduct it from our salary before they give us the change. We are the people that are bearing the bulk of personal income tax in the country. The wealthy are not. Maybe also because part of their money is hidden in all these tax havens anyway. So let's be able to have certain levels of discussion at the multilateral level, even inside of Nigeria too. That the wealthy must do more to help solve, wealthy in Nigeria to do more to help solve Nigerian problems, the wealthy across the world to do more to help solve some of the world's problems.
Mm-hmm. So let's stay on this issue around the issues that are raised by the Pandora Papers. It's also raising, as you said, the taxing of the rich. And we've seen many stories of rich people hiding their money and assets from authorities. And as you've mentioned earlier as well, that's a situation we've seen quite often. One of those who's implicated or mentioned in this is the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair and his wife. And when you look at what they're said to have sort of avoided paying in stamp duties, just under £400,000, I think it is, the question you then have to ask yourself is, why are they doing this? Tony Blair is someone who knows the law. He knows what the appearance of even impropriety would mean to someone like him. Why would people like Tony Blair, why would people higher and richer than him be doing the kind of things they're doing, aside from the fact that they're able to get away with it?
You see, anytime there is a gap in what I will call the legal framework around anything, we now have to entrust the rest of the stories to the morality of the people. What some of these guys are doing, like Tony Blair that you mentioned, are not in strict terms illegal. It's not. It's just that there is a window that you can capitalize on to do something to they might call it saving themselves on taxes or whatever. And they went into that place. Now, what would be difficult to prove for Tony Blair is to say that he was actively trying to dodge taxes. It will be difficult to substantiate. Rather, it will be seen as the fact that there is a window by which he can pay less tax, and he capitalized on that window, and there is no criminality. Which takes us back to that multilateralism that we need to look at. Between us, between the non-taxables and the taxable where all this money and this tax, what should be allowed, what should not be allowed? What treaties can the world agree upon and find to that will help ensure that the people they benefit rather than having all this money start in something? What kind of individuals should this country be willing to establish this kind of structures for a politically exposed person, for example, be allowed? It's a question we must ask. And can we put a law in place, a treaty that all of us can agree to, that because you are the current president of this place, you should not be able to do this or do that? And all of us will obey. Otherwise, for as long as there is a gap out there that is not an illegal action, there is no crime being committed, people will use it, whether they are former presidents or they are billionaires or weapons, they will use it.
And it's interesting you mentioned every country, everyone sitting down and agreeing on these things, because a lot of questions have been raised about the regulators in these financial systems. These are crimes that are leaving paper trails. The paper trails may be difficult to unravel, may take a long time to follow, but because of the movement and the number of things that need to be done, there are paper trails. So there are a lot of questions about the regulators' activities as well in these situations, because some of these monies have to leave their countries of origin before they make it to the tax havens? How are they getting out of these countries of origin? What's the process for flagging some of these movements or even individual accounts and corporate accounts? But in the long run, I think the question I have to ask as we wrap up is, what do you think is going to come of all of this? As I spoke about earlier, we have the Lux Papers, we have the LuxLeaks, the Panama Papers, we have, of course, FinCEN files as well. Now it's Pandora Papers. Do you think this is also calling the global fight against corruption, money laundering, illicit flows into question as well? Where do you think the average man or woman who's watching all of this play out is going to think next time their leader gets up on the podium or the pulpit and tells them, pay your taxes, follow the law, do the right thing?
It actually rubbishes the fight against corruption and money laundering and all the other issues that the world is talking about. Well, it could be argued that, for example, the Pandora report probably spoke about 20 or thereabouts former head of state and head of state or prime minister. The question will be, what about another 600 or 800 other former head of state and the rest of them that are not involved in it? So the question could be raised about that. After all, it's still a little number of head of government that are involved in this. However, you see, who are the regulators? Who appoints the regulators in a country? It is these same people that are involved in this matter. We're talking of head of government. The chief regulator of the financial sector in Nigeria is the CBN. The CBN governor is approved, is appointed by the president. Now, if there is not a case in which the president himself is involved, consider that it is a very big issue we are talking about. The core actors are also the core decision makers. And when you look at the people who put these structures together at the tax tables, who are they? They are lawyers. They are lawyers and compliance officers. They know the law, they know the regulations, and they know all the gaps, and they put all these things together. When you see some of the documentation that are involved in putting in say wealth management and putting some of these things together, you'll be amazed. They go through a whole lot of compliance issues, trying to navigate all those narrow paths where the law has not covered. And they do these things. So it's a big discussion out there. It is not going to be an easy one because of the caliber of the people that are involved. But on a general basis, it rubbishes the corruption and anti-money laundering fight that is supposed to be going on across the world. And we need to have a multilateral discussion
about it. All right, and on that note, Gbolahan Olojede, I'll say a very big thank you. It's just the beginning of how this story develops, so I'm very sure we'll be touching base with you in the next few weeks. There are a number of African-related conversations to the Pandora Papers as well. I keep wanting to say Pandora's box because really that's what this has opened once again for the financial system around the world, and we'll be watching how it develops very closely. Gbolahan, thank you as always.
The pleasure is mine.
All right. 11.9 million confidential files, 600 journalists from around the world, 150 news organizations, and revelations linking more than 140 politicians and some 50 countries. What's going to happen when all of the papers are released? We'll be following up the developments right here on Business Edge.